This is Stephanie, and this is the Mocha Minutes Podcast. Hey guys, before we get into the episode, I just want to let you know about something that's a little new here at the Mocha Minutes Podcast. We are now participating in Buy Me a Coffee. So if you haven't heard, buymeacoffee.com is a place where you can show some support and some love monetarily to some of your favorite content creators. That includes me. So it's in the increments of either $1, $3, or $5, and you can do as many as you would like. So I just wanted to let you guys know, would love some support. So if you would go to buymeacoffee.com/Mocha Minutes, I would greatly appreciate it. It will also be in the show notes. Okay, here we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Just to give you a trigger warning about today. Today's topic on this show is going to be pretty heavy. We will be talking about suicide in the context of the passing of Stephen Twitch Boss. So I definitely want to give you that trigger warning, and listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the episode. Someday at Christmas, men won't be boys, playing with bombs like kids play with toys. One warm December, our hearts will see a world where men are free. Someday at Christmas, there'll be no wars when we have learned what Christmas is for. When we have found what life's really worth, there'll be peace on earth. Someday all our dreams will come to be. Someday in a world where men are free. Maybe not in time for you and me, but someday at Christmas time. Hello and welcome to the Mocha Minutes Podcast. I am Stephanie. Click is my pen. Thank you so much for joining me. Clickety, I love clicky pens. Click, 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 click. I don't know why. I take little joy as much as I can. So for anybody who doesn't know, Someday at Christmas is one of my favorite Christmas songs. It is by the Stevie Wonder. He has a duet with Andrew Day, and I believe Lizzo now also has a cover. It's one of my favorite Christmas songs. And it's weird to say, like, with Christmas songs, like secular Christmas songs, it's like, of course, this Christmas, Donnie's version, y'all know, is really good. The Christmas song from Nat King Cole, like, of course, but for some reason, like Someday at Christmas has always been one of my faves, just because of I just want good things. I just want peace and being realistic, saying, and like, may not be in my lifetime, but maybe in another lifetime or two, it will just be very peaceful. So it's just very optimistic in a very, very dark world. So this week I am joined by my girl who has all the reels that make me laugh. She has every wig on Amazon. And she makes the reels. She does the lip syncs. She does the videos. Okay. We have that, not that African butterfly, not them African butterflies, not those, but that. She is the one. Okay. So we have Nyemade, aka that African butterfly, here with me this week. Nyemade, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I am okay. Christmas is weird to say this weekend. It's like December, just like,
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. Because I was out like last weekend and there was so much traffic. I'm like, oh my God, this
Mhm.
traffic is crazy. I'm like, why is he like this is the last weekend before Christmas? Wait a minute, it is.
Yeah.
Like,
December flew by.
it's like, what the heck is happening here? I'm like, how, huh? I was like, okay. So Christmas is next weekend. But I asked Nyemade here not to talk about Christmas. um, but to have a conversation about what transpired last week. So for everyone who did not hear, and I'm pretty sure there wasn't anybody who didn't, um, but Stephen Twitch Boss is no longer with us. One, I thought he was younger. He was only 40. Um, and basically, um, I feel like I'm on TikTok. Um, the base, he lost his battle. I don't want to use the S word. And if we're on TikTok, they would say unaliving.
Mm.
But essentially, that's what we're saying. And it's very interesting, the conversations that I have been hearing, and I know that you have been hearing, because essentially, it's very much like when these things kind of happen, people are ready to point the fingers everywhere else, um, pointing the fingers, placing judgment, and just being very confused.
Yeah.
Um, what is so? Because I know what I've heard, but what are some of the conversations that you've heard that you're like, wait, what?
Well, I mean, I think the thing that always gets me a little bit riled up is that was so selfish of them. As
Mm,
someone who, lives with mental health and mental illness things myself and understands it from the person going through it, I can promise you it's anything but selfish. And it's unfortunate when you hear people make judgments like that.
mm-hmm.
Um, or when people say like, "Oh,
Sorry. Whew, the heck? Sorry, threw me off. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Whew.
I know, I was just gonna say, hearing people make comments and statements like that is rough, or saying, that that person was weak for not being able to put up with it. And those things are usually said by people who, quite honestly, have no clue what they're really talking about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and even if it is a situation where they have some experience around the area, usually they're just thinking about it as the person who is impacted
Yeah.
by the loss of a friend or family member, which is understandable. Like I get that viewpoint, but
Mm-hmm.
it's frustrating that they feel the need to speak on it instead of just putting out compassion at a time where compassion is really needed.
Yeah.
And all otherwise they start to like speculate, right? Like they can't see this person who was, like you said, just 40 years old, smiling, happy. He was dancing on TikTok 3 days before. So
Mm-hmm.
their mind can't grasp how someone like that would do something, because they don't really understand that it doesn't look a certain way. And often the people who are smiling and happiest are covering up, that sadness. And so because they can't really grasp that, there's the conspiracy theories online, like, oh,
Yeah.
like maybe he was losing all of his money, or maybe some big secret was about to be revealed. And it's just like, or maybe he was just someone who was dealing with something.
Yeah. I think that's yeah, because that's similar to what I've been hearing. Because I think I was heading into work when I heard it, and the first person that came to my mind was Robin Williams. Because I think for a lot of people, they're like, what do you mean? Why do you like, what do you mean? Why would he do that? Or you
Right.
think about, because you're thinking like, Robin Williams was so funny and he made everybody happy. I'm like, that doesn't mean that he was happy.
Mm-hmm.
Think of the former Miss USA who lost her battle as well. Everybody's like, she was so bright and light, and I can't believe this. And I was like, yeah, because that's not what depression looks like. It's like it just doesn't. This is why when Monique was
Right.
saying, like, if you see somebody in the store and they're looking bad, tap them and see what they're see if everything is okay. I'm like, as someone who also battles with depression, believe me, my outside does not match my inside when it's bad. When it's
Yep.
bad, it's like, nope, you would never know that. So I'm like, that's a little bit dangerous. And also, what are you actually going to do?
Right. That's the other thing. Everybody's like, oh, reach out to them. Like, but for what? What are you going to say to them? And what? Because I can tell you also when I'm going through it, like, yes, it's nice hearing, we love you, we care.
Mm-hmm.
But I know those things. But I don't mind. Ooh,
Yeah.
excuse me. I don't mind that as much as like the ones who reach out and try to give advice, because it's like, what are you telling me that like my therapist hasn't already told me, or that I haven't read? I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important when you are reaching out to say things like love you,
Mm-hmm.
you have place, you have value, things like that are better than trying to tell people to like think positively and this too shall pass. Like usually someone going through it does not need to or want to hear that from you.
Yeah, because that's and the thing about I think I didn't realize how sometimes us saying cliche things really are pretty like disingenuous and shitty. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that until my dad passed. Because I would
Mm-hmm.
like think about the stuff that I would say to people when they lost someone, and I'm kind of just thankful and blessed that no one said those things to me. Not that I said
Mm-hmm.
anything careless, but I'm so sorry for your loss, and this, it's just gonna pass, and this too, like I'm so glad that nobody said, and this too shall pass, or I understand what you're feeling. No,
Right.
you don't. You don't know at all.
Yep.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like somebody I know had recently lost her dad, and I said, I know what road you're going down. We're not walking the same, but I know the road that you're going down when you lose a parent. Like losing a
Mm-hmm.
parent is a road that like a lot of us, or if not all of us, are going to go through. But the walk is just going to be so different for everybody. And that's okay to say. Now say, I know
Mm-hmm.
exactly how you feel. You actually kind of don't.
Right. Yeah,
So
I really have learned to be careful with I understand because I mean I naturally am a very like empathetic person.
mm-hmm.
I feel like I try to think of things from the place of others, but this year especially was really really difficult for me in
Mm,
several different ways, and it really made me realize the things that like oh I really don't understand. Like I've always had anxiety and
mm-hmm.
I've dealt with it, but I didn't really have like super bad panic attacks about leaving the house until this year. And I'm like, oh,
Mm,
I really didn't understand like how debilitating it is because mine was never at that level. And I
right.
thought because, I'd be like, oh, I really don't want to go, or I'm a little bit nervous. I'm like, well, I deal with anxiety and, oh, it's tough, but I push through. But, I understand it can be rough, but like, no, until you get it to the level where it's like, no, I can't, like, I want to leave the house, but I cannot. My heart is pumping. I am crying. Like, I physically can't go. Like, until you feel it, you don't really know?
Yeah.
Or, like I think I'm empathetic to people with mobility issues because, you
Yeah.
see it, whether it's a cane, a walker, a wheelchair, you're like, I understand, like, that must be so rough, like, you're empathetic to it. But it wasn't until this year when I snapped both of my Achilles heels and now I'm like with a cane that I'm like, oh, I did not understand at all how terrible it is having
Mm,
mobility issues because like just
yeah.
like you realize very quickly all the ways with which the world is not equipped to help people in
Yeah.
those situations, like how people don't even think about how really far it is from the door to the car when you can barely walk and it hurts so much. um
Correct.
or having like accessible stuff, and you can't think of everything for everyone at all times, and we're never going to be able to experience everything, nor should we. But I really learned to hold back on saying I understand when it is a situation that I haven't gone through. Because the truth is, I probably do not understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you brought up thinking about mobility because it's something that we just don't think about as a collective. Because I mean, if you even look
Mm-hmm.
at the pandemic, before that, they were like, "There's no possible way people can work from home; nothing will get done." And so those who actually needed the like one be able to work, but would have to
Mm-hmm.
do it from home, they were told it's not possible. And now 3 years later, it is most certainly possible, and a lot of places are actually switching to 100% remote. So it's kind
Yep.
of like, oh my God, it's making like people who have like young kids and got to go to school, like, oh, it makes it a little bit easier, but it also is literally a smack in the face of everybody who's like, I've literally been asking for this for years and y'all told
Right.
us it was not possible. It
Mm-hmm.
is, as long as it's not, it's like it becomes possible when it's like that's the only thing you can do if you want things to keep
When you
working.
want to make it possible.
Correct. So it's
Yeah,
like,
and I
oh,
think that a lot of times.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to. No, I was just gonna say, I think a lot of times, like human nature makes us want to like resolve things. Like when people bring an issue or concern, like we want to have an answer, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's hard for people to not have an answer. So they want to fill it with those cliche things or, just some type of advice. And like sometimes it's okay to say like this sucks. Like that's my thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay to just be like that's really rough. Or, even someone who is dealing with the loss. Like my thing is saying like I can't, I have no idea, I cannot imagine what you're going through. It's actually one of my top fears is taking
Mm,
that road myself.
yeah.
So all I can do is say, you are in my, you're in my prayers, and that's, but like sometimes that has to, like I personally would rather have that than someone try to say they understand when they don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Because um I think that's the thing. It's like people like because we're all like it's well meaning. It's like we're talking about intent versus impact. And essentially it's
Mm-hmm.
like everybody has good intentions, but the impact is um it feels kind of shitty when it's like you actually don't know what it's like. Because I'm like, I
Right.
don't know what it's like. It's like I don't know what it's like to grieve a child. I'm like, I'm never gonna say, oh my God, this is too class. I'm just like, my thoughts and prayers are with you during this time. Please be kind to yourself. That I think that's the only thing I really can say is like just be kind to
Yeah.
yourself because I think a lot of it like is definitely social pressure to just get over it. It's like, girl, like work gotta still happen. It's like be kind to yourself because you're gonna have days where it's just rough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to have rough because one is like you're healing, not healed. You are healing, and it's like you're gonna be healing for basically your whole life when you
Right.
grieve someone that's so close to you. Um, so it looks like so the person that we're talking about, if you didn't know, for anybody who doesn't know, Steven Boss, aka Twitch. So I never watched So You Think You Can Dance, so I didn't know he was on there. I was like, oh, he's a good dancer. They're like, well, he was on the So You Think You Can Dance. I'm like, oh, okay. I just knew him as the DJ that was on Ellen's show, and I'm like, oh, he seems fun. I'm like, she always has nice music. Ellen did her three little dances up and down the stairs,
Right.
but Twitch was just always fun. He and his wife Allison, they had three small children. So it's just kind of like that's what I knew about him. So and everybody was just like, I love being around him. So another thing that I noticed was people saying, I just talked to him. I just saw him. And it's like, you want to say when it comes to mental health issues, oh, I'm sorry, let me rewind this back. That wasn't the first thing I saw. The first thing I saw was like it had to be something was big about to come out about him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
why he was just like, you know what? Let me just end it all and go
Yeah.
to a hotel. It was like, girl, what? Or maybe it just not. It's kind of like because we have mental health issues. It's like we know that it's like, girl, it could really not be that. It really
Mm-hmm.
just not be that because this is just a fight you're going to be fighting. Because you think about like the economic crash in the 1920s where people were like just hopping out of windows because they were
Mm-hmm.
going broke. I'm like, this is not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're like some kind of like big scandal. And I'm like, what? That he's like really like a Gila monster? What do y'all think is going to happen? Or
Right.
he just lost his battle. It really
Mm-hmm.
could just be that. And as much as TMZ is TMZ, the fact that they put out their own report saying, let's like, yeah, there's a rumor going around and like it's because of this, and that is not true. I'm like, now how many times does TMZ actually do that?
Right. They're really accurate. Well, and I mean, I think part of the thing is, A, as we know, just the area of mental health and mental illness is an area that people don't really understand.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people still don't recognize it as being a problem, recognize it as something that's needed to be addressed. And so because they don't put a lot of strength into it, they also don't understand it. And then you take that and the fact that like most people at some point in their life will deal with something major, right? Like they just will. They'll have something upsetting. You mentioned the recent passing of your father. They'll go through something that'll make life really difficult for them. For some of them, it'll be really bad, and they'll put them in a depressive state.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but time will heal that, for the most part. So it's kind of hard for someone who, especially someone who has gone through a depressive state at some point in their life because of something, it's usually
Mm-hmm.
hard for those people to understand those of us with like clinical depression and
Yeah.
major depressive episode. Like they don't quite understand what it's like that we are like when we try to say like, oh no, we're always down, even on our happiest days. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel that happy. Like when I say I'm happy and I'm thrilled, I'm still just like not.
Yeah.
Um, and so when you live your life in a constant state of just not feeling great when you then add on something terrible happening in life or an extra like depressive episode for whatever reason. Maybe just you're going through it, maybe something else triggers it. Like you're being pulled down even further and it makes it even harder. But it's hard for people to understand that we're not all starting from the same baseline of dealing with the problem. Some people are
Right.
already starting barely catching their breath as it is.
Right. Because I think there's also, I think a lot of people, because you're right, absolutely, that there isn't a collective understanding of the about depression and that there are levels to this. It's like
Mm-hmm.
peeling like layers of onions. There are levels to this, and like everybody's depression does not look the same way. Everybody's level is not the same. So it's so easy to just go, oh, sad. I'm like, yeah, that's not what depression is.
Mm-mm.
That's truly not. It's like um there are people who literally like think about maybe I should just not be here because I don't want because I'm a burden to someone. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing that's like I'm thinking about my grief journey is kind of like you're just masking. I don't want to say being stealth because stealth is a whole different thing. But when you are someone who deals with mental illness, a lot of the times it's like you're hiding from other people because you're like, if people really knew how bad it got, I'd become a burden for someone. And it's like you don't want to do that. You're like, I don't want to be a burden to
Right.
anybody. I'm like, no, I'm try to fight this on my own. And then you're like, yeah, you can't fight this on your own. But you also sometimes it's like when you are sinking, you don't want to drag nobody down with you. And I think that's the issue. So to hear how this happened, where and also please stop, y'all. Hello. Hi. Please stop doing this whole check on your strong friend thing. Please stop doing that because you're under the impression that there was not a support system there or that you can check
Mm-hmm.
on somebody to make sure they don't check out. And that is literally not what happens. There are people who literally lose their battle in a house full of people. Someone talks to them every single
Mm-hmm.
day. Somebody calls you every single day. Somebody, you see your neighbor, somebody talk to you, always have breakfast with you every morning. Still would happen. Saying that, basically kind of putting the blame on the people as closest to him in his life is literally the weirdest thing I've ever heard. But of course, this is what happens when people are looking for a reason. I'm like, oh, well, it
Right.
had to be because of this. I'm like, or it couldn't have. It
Well,
had to be
and it's
this
like you said
because,
with the burden.
yeah.
It's kind of like what you said with the putting the burden on others. Because like even when you quote unquote check on your strong friends, it's like for what? Like what are you going to say? When I was going through it earlier this year, I briefly recently talked to my mom about it, like what I
Mm-hmm.
was going through. She's like, you can always talk to us. And I'm like, I know, but it's just like, what are you gonna say though? What
Right.
for me, it's like I feel now on top of being upset about whatever I'm upset about or feeling how I feel, I would then know that I put some of that on your shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
that there's nothing really that you can do to make this better for me, but I'm laying it on your shoulders and adding to your burden, which then adds to my burden that I've added to your burden. It's you know what I mean? Like it doesn't so that's oftentimes why people don't want to talk about it because it's like, well, what are you going to do besides tell me like how loved I am, which is wonderful. But a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people know that, they know that they're loved, they know that they're needed. It's not, and yes, there are some people who may not, and of course you should, but
Mm-hmm.
trust me, there are a lot of people who absolutely know that, and it doesn't change how they feel.
Yeah.
We wish it could. You know, in addition to depression, there are people who just naturally have suicidal ideations.
Yeah.
I recently did a live about it because there's
Mm-hmm.
people think about it like people wanting to hurt themselves, which is part of it, but there's passive suicidal ideations and there's active suicidal ideations. And people
Mm-hmm.
don't realize there's a lot of us who live with the passive version all the time, or it's just kind of like, I'd rather not be here, for being honest. Like I'm here because
Yeah.
I'm here. And, I try to stay in my faith and say that God wants me here for a reason. And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
keep pushing through, but oh, I'd rather not. And then there's the
Yeah.
people who then from that point, sometimes have it go to active, or people who never really understand or have it passive. They only have it active because they have those sad, nobody cares about me, nobody loves me. And those
Mm-hmm.
types of people definitely can benefit from those conversations. You're
Mm-hmm.
loved, you're needed, you're valued. And not that people who have passive can't benefit from it. They can. It's just that it doesn't hit the same way. You know what I mean? Like I know I'm loved. I know all of
Mm-hmm.
those wonderful things. And I sincerely wish all of those wonderful things would stop my I don't want to be here thoughts, but it doesn't,
Yeah.
so you have to sort of find your own reasons for pushing through the dark days.
Yeah. Yeah. You do, because I think it's so easy to say, let's just put a label on it, or like let's find a reason. I'm like, yeah, sometimes there is no reason. And it's
Hmm.
like there's not a reason that you can pinpoint.
Right.
Um, so as much as I'm like, I usually don't applaud TMZ, I actually do applaud them by saying, yeah, we're just going to put this out there. This has nothing to do with money, because I think that's the other part of this. They look at someone like Twitch or Robin Williams or Kate Spade or Anthony Bourdain or Phyllis Hyman and think these are people with money.
Hmm.
Me, a poor, would actually be like, I would be happier with money. That's not how any of this works.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like when you see people like, I think it was like a general shock of, but he's famous. People
Hmm.
know him. He has money. He has love. He has a wife. He has children. I'm like, what is there to be sad about? I'm like, do you honestly want to know? So,
Hmm.
so it's
Well, and
kind of
that's just
like,
it, is that sometimes there's nothing to be said about. And
yeah.
that's what's frustrating as well. Do you know
Mm-hmm.
how frustrating and horrible it is to literally sit there and be like, my life is great, but I don't want to be here. Or my life is wonderful, but I can't stop crying. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and then how do you talk to somebody about that?
Yeah.
How do you, with a straight face, say, oh no, my life is wonderful, but I am so sad? Because
Yeah.
you feel selfish also. Like that's a time where the word selfish comes into play. Because
Mm-hmm.
there are people with like struggling through life stuff who aren't
Yeah.
having the tears you have or the feelings you have. And you're sitting here going, oh, things are wonderful, but this is how I feel. And of course, you can't help that. That is how you feel. And that's why it's important to get a therapist or see a psychiatrist if you can, because
Yeah.
sometimes it has more to do with the chemical imbalances in your brain. Because
Mm-hmm.
people forget sometimes that when we talk about mental stuff, because we use words like feelings, people forget
Mm-hmm.
that it's still attached to an organ, which is your brain. And just like
Mm-hmm.
any other organ can malfunction, so can your brain. And just like how some organs need additional help to work properly, so does your brain. Um, but yeah, it makes it almost extra hard when things are going great. And it's funny because everyone will always say like, "Oh, money doesn't buy you happiness," but the minute something like this happens, they go, "Oh, that person must have lost all their money." It's like,
Yeah.
well, no. I mean, that could be it, but that also could not be it, because it could be something completely different or nothing. If that person has been dealing with clinical depression, it could be absolutely nothing at all.
Correct. Because I think that's the issue, is that when you see something like this, because it is tragic, because it's just a tragedy. It's like a loss of life is tragic. You're looking for a tangible
Hmm.
reason when the reason is intangible. It's like there is, it's not, it's going to be so clear and cut and dry, because to this day, and I guess if I really wanted to dig, I could. I refuse to. We don't know why Robin Williams isn't here anymore. And I'm glad his family is kind of like, yeah, we're not telling y'all asses. And y'all don't need to. And it's kind of like, leave Twitch's family
I thought it
alone.
was depression, was it not?
It was, but I'm saying like something other than like, a tangible, oh, he lost his money, there's a scandal. This I'm like, I didn't dig that far. I knew he
Mm.
was having mental health
Yeah, yeah,
issues,
yeah,
but it's like, I'm not
yeah.
going too far into that. It's not like a this
Hmm.
big thing happened. So yes, so let me just, yeah. So it
Right.
was because of depression. And
Well,
it's still one of those things where it's like,
and then I think it's also,
sorry, sorry, go ahead. Whew.
no, sorry, go ahead.
No, oh, I'm coughing. That's why I
No,
said
I
go
was just gonna
ahead.
say I think it's also too when we I think it's also hard too when we bring race into play, even though people like to be like, race doesn't matter. It does matter
It
for
does matter.
something. So like especially when you take the black community, that it's so much harder. We are 20% or 20 times more likely to experience mental health issues, but only
Mm-hmm.
25% of us will get help, unlike 40% of white Americans. And
Mm-hmm.
then you put religion into that, 85% of African Americans would identify themselves as being fairly religious. And that's a huge barrier to people getting mental health care, because they feel like, oh, I should be able to pray and my faith should take me through this. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely something to be said for your faith giving you guidance, giving you extra help. But, just praying isn't going to give you the tools to overcome some of those dark moments. And just praying isn't going to help the serotonin fire off in your brain that your brain chemicals are missing if you're
Mm-hmm.
not on medicine. So people really have to take a moment to realize that it's a step further than just that, and those things sort of place a barrier on our community as far as getting help. And you add on to that trying to find someone who looks like you. Only
Mm.
6.2% of psychiatrists are Black.
Yeah,
That's a tiny, tiny number.
very
And
small number.
then what about health insurance? 10.4% of people, Black people, have no health insurance. And therapists are not cheap, they are expensive.
They are
Thankfully,
not.
thanks to the pandemic, we have a lot of them, trying to have other alternatives for people.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of barriers as well for people seeking help. And I think people need to remember that as well.
Yeah, because and out of the pandemic, been some terrible things, but there are some good things too. There have been more options for people because for our community, it's like you can be Black or you can be crazy. You can't be Black and crazy, even though it's like that's very ridiculous. And
Hmm.
I might think about it, but it's kind of like that's why people don't go. So now you have the option of maybe doing this online via Zoom or Skype. Well, not Skype because HIPAA. But having these different options to do it virtually, that means you don't have to leave your home and nobody has to find out. If that even makes sense. Because you're like, I hope you know I'm going to a therapist. And it was like, why not? It's like you
Right.
were like something terrible has to happen for you to go, or just like, hey, I just want to fix me, or I have to change. So it's kind of like there's more options. There's actually like therapy groups because sometimes you're like, what if I just want to meet someone? And talk about people who
Yeah.
can like not walk the same walk, but maybe can relate just a little bit. So I think that's the
Right.
issue, especially because we're thinking about because we're not saying the quiet part quietly, we're saying it out loud. Twitch was a Black man. And there are a lot of Black men who are very, very unhealed, but are sitting in the
Hmm.
I can be Black or I can be crazy. I am the head of my household. I have to run the
Right.
house. I have to go out here, be a Black person in America or whatever country I'm in. I don't have time for this. And there's so many people who are unhealed for years and remain unhealed. And then nothing gets fixed because it's like, oh man, just go to the barbershop. Oh man, go play some basketball. Oh man, go get a job. Oh, go man, go do this. Go play a video game, do something. Not that these outlets, and let me just say this.
Hmm.
If you are someone who's a gamer, I'm not telling you to put your game down for real. I love my Twitch, my Twitch, my Switch. I cannot beat the last level on the new Mario game. It's bugging me. But anyway, if you have outlets, baby, use them. But please know there are so many people out there um that could be helpful. So you think about pockets of places. I think it's Black. Oh gosh, why am I blanking on her podcast? But it basically was talking about Black therapists because it seems so niche
Yeah.
and it's not niche. I have a therapist. She's a Black woman. She's a Black Christian one. I have a Christian
Hmm.
therapist. So it's like when they say just pray it away, I'm like, you do realize if God created every person on this earth, he created therapists too. It's like, yeah, there are
Yeah.
people you can actually find that. And the thing about it is, it was a hunt to find a Black woman. It was like the thing about it is I'm glad I
Um,
have the insurance that I have, but it's like to your point, what about people who don't? What if they are like if this is still okay, um on public assistance, they have Medicare, Medicaid, or if they're on Obamacare, or it's like they don't
mhm.
have a position, they don't work a job where they include mental health benefits in their benefits package. It's not there. And yeah, hi guys, I also do.
which is extra unfortunate.
Correct, because there's a lot of places that
Which
just
is extra
don't. They're
unfortunate because
like,
they often need it the most.
mhm. Because they're like, oh, okay, well, you're lucky we got dental. I'm like, did I have mental health? Is that a part of it where you can get
Mhm.
counseling, or if you have to be institutionalized, there's like a copay instead of like paying the thousands of dollars it would cost if you were um you would have to be institutionalized. I'm like, is that in there? It's like it has to be in there. Um and it's good to see that there are some
Well, and we
employers.
see that it trickles in so many.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. It's
No,
for
it's
those
fine.
listening because we're not seeing each other. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're
But
fine.
no, I was gonna say like it's so hard too because it trickles into like other ways
Mm-hmm.
that it impacts people because those same people who have the hardest time getting help need it the
Mm-hmm.
most. People who are below poverty level are 3 times more likely to have a severe mental health or mental illness crisis. Children who live in near violence and have more exposure are
Mm-hmm.
in need of it more. And those are the exact same people who have the hardest time getting it. So they're in these environments where they need the most help and they
Right,
aren't getting help. Then you
right.
add on to that the stigma that continues to remain within the Black community about people being crazy. And it's just like, it's not that it's a crazy thing, it's that you're actually dealing with life stuff. And there's something about like praising the struggle in the Black community that we as a
Mm-hmm.
whole need to get past. Like
Yeah.
it makes it better for you if you have to get everything by fighting tooth and nail, and that's what makes us strong people. Like I don't want to be strong. I want to be healthy and happy.
I would love a
And
soft
like,
life.
we
Give me
hear
one.
them say things like, "Oh, that's a white people problem." Like it's not.
Yeah.
We don't always have to take the path of most resistance, and life gives us enough resistance as it is that
Yeah.
we shouldn't be encouraging it for each other. Like we should be working with each other to see how we can give each other those healthy tools and give each other those things. And like if you even if you want to break it down by race, if you have one race who's experiencing a lot less trauma, but their
Mm-hmm.
trauma is identified enough to the point where 40% of them are getting the help that they need. What do you think is needed in the race that's experiencing even more trauma? And only
Mm-hmm.
25% are going to get the help they need. Like if anything, we need it even more. And sometimes people don't want to talk to therapists. Like, oh, like I saw something the other day. It was like, well, why would I see a therapist if they need therapists? It's like, what profession doesn't still need that profession?
A doctor
You
still
don't
needs
go
a
like, why would I go
doctor.
to a
Like,
mechanic if
what?
a mechanic? Exactly. Like your doctor still needs a doctor. Your mechanic
That
still
needs
needs
a
a mechanic.
mechanic.
So it's not about that. It's about talking to somebody who has the tools to help you. And that
Correct.
is really what I try to remind people of when they talk about it. Because they're
Mm-hmm.
just like, I don't want someone to sit and tell me about myself and my feelings. First of all, if you're going to a good therapist, they're not telling you a lot. They're asking you a
They're
lot of
asking you a
questions.
lot of
They are
questions.
making you think
Mm-hmm.
very hard. Yes. Yes, they're asking you and they are really just helping you walk through stuff. The things that
Mm-hmm.
they're going to tell you though are going to be like tools. Like a huge thing for me is like, when I have negative thoughts and early on in my therapy, my doctor really taught me how to like stop those thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
identify what part of it was true and what part of it wasn't true, and
Mm-hmm.
go from there. And I'm not talking about like outrageous, like I see things thought. I'm talking like you're a bum, like little things your voice will say to you. You're such a slacker.
Mm-hmm.
Those things add up and they affect you on a daily basis and how you see yourself. And sometimes you need someone to give you those tools to help you push through it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of information out in the world right now, which is good and bad, where you can get
Mm-hmm.
some of that yourself by like watching the videos, reading the books. But most people aren't doing that either. So it's like pick something. But to think that you can just go through life without any little bit of like self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
without any little bits of like looking into and reading into ways to help you think differently,
Mm-hmm.
you're really doing yourself a disservice and you're really hindering your growth. And it's always interesting to me the people who are very like adamantly against any form of self-help or they want to mock even the thought of self-help. And it's like, do you really think you got all the tools you needed to live through life in your few years of high school so you never need to learn anything ever again for the rest of your life? Be real,
Correct.
my friend, be real. Like you need to read something or you need to go to a doctor, you need to watch something. Like things are evolving, and the only way you're going to evolve with it is to take in things. And so even if at first you don't want to go to a therapist, then
Mm-hmm.
look up people online who maybe are talking about certain things and are giving different ways to things. There's ways to help, but it's not a weakness to say you need that help, and
Right.
you're certainly not alone, like you mentioned, especially, with Black men. Like, there's that, oh, I have to be tough, oh, I have to do whatever. But you know, what's happening when the lights are off at night and you're in your room by yourself? Like, you're human, right? Like, are you crying and ashamed of it? But you're human, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. What you should be doing is figuring out how to get help so you're not feeling all of that burden on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I think that's what it is. It's like there's so many different ways to get to it, but it's just a stigma. It's kind of like for us, for Black people, it's kind of like we're the ones that came out of the mud. We are the ones who like did so much and pulled ourselves up. Like, so if like I'm saying like a lot. If you pulled yourself up, if you get to a space or you get to a point, there's got to be some struggle attached to it to make it quote unquote real. And that's not how
Mm.
any of this works. It's like everybody can't struggle. And it's like if you had a couple of generations behind you struggle, and then you get to a place where you may have generational wealth, or you may just have more options than the generations before you. Um, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a soft life. It's like Black women, we don't have to struggle to find happiness and love in a partner. Black men, you don't have to struggle either. It's like you don't have to. I'm like, that's a nice idea to think about yourself as George and Wheezy or James in Florida. And it's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, it's not that idea. Both of those shows came up where the idea of a white man, but that's neither here nor there. Um, that doesn't make it any less beautiful if you literally just come from a good home, you're somewhat affluent, and you find love with another Black person. It's like that does not dictate that your love is not real or you don't know about real life. I'm like, sometimes real life is not having to cut like thick cuts of government cheese and make really good grilled cheese sandwiches. By the way, they are really good. It burns really nice. It grows up really nice. But that's neither, again, neither here nor there. Okay.
Right.
Neither there. Um, so because you were talking about resources, so the podcast I was thinking about was Therapy for Black Girls.
Mm.
That is what I
Yeah.
was thinking about because she also created a directory. Also, there is a directory called therapyforblackmen.org. So there
Yep.
is actually a place there, and they said they have been able to provide, and this is as of November 15th, 2022, Therapy for Black Men has been able to provide $70,000 in counting to sponsor free therapy for our men nationally, thanks to the kindness of our donors. Because that's the other thing. They're offering this for free. I think there's other thing. I'm like, oh, I can't afford that. I'm like, you would be amazed how many different, and there are churches that do this, religious organizations that have set up hotlines for you to call. Take it from
Mm-hmm.
someone. I actually did call one of those hotlines. Was it helpful? Maybe a little bit. But the thing about it is that it was, I can't say that it was a waste of my time because it
All
wasn't.
right.
But sometimes it's like you might just need a little push. Because when I talked about, therapists and therapists that I've had, this was not my first therapist that I've had my entire life. Sometimes you got to find the right fit, and sometimes it's not your first therapist. And I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this, sometimes people get discouraged if the first time they seek out therapy and it doesn't, and you and the therapist don't mix. It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
therapy is not for me. I'm like, or that's just not the right therapist for you.
Yeah, and I say that all the time. Like, you need to really, like, it's like you
It's
want
like
to
you're
make sure someone
dating.
who meshes with you. Yeah.
It's like
It's kind of
you're
like you're
dating.
dating. Like, it may not be, and sometimes you might even need like a second time with that therapist. My current
Mm-hmm.
therapist, after our first appointment, I was like, I don't know about her. I don't know if this is gonna work.
Mm.
Now
Okay.
she's fabulous, but like,
Mm-hmm.
it took me a minute to get like comfortable with her. But I've also had ones where I'm like, no, this isn't gonna work, and I'm switching, and they're not sensitive. Like, they understand it. So
Mm-hmm.
if you say like, I don't think this is gonna work, they're not gonna be upset. They're going to want you to find someone who works well with you.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to mention, so for those who may not know, there's an organization called NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a fellowship with them for Delaware. I'm the diversity and equity. I have the diversity and equity fellowship, but if you look on their main page, they actually have a article about um, African Americans and Blacks and how and our mental health. But in that, if you scroll down, they have a ton of Black mental health resources.
Mm,
So they have different groups, like you mentioned the Men Heal. They have Black Men Healed, Black Mental Alliance, Black Wellness. Just a ton of different groups and that you can go to. But then there's some self-care options because, as we both mentioned,
mm-hmm,
sometimes resources are difficult. So there's treatment directories, like the Association of Black Psychiatrists
mm-hmm,
directory is in there. But
mm-hmm.
there's places you can click to learn more about dealing with different, life disorders and things like that. And then they also have some educational resources on racism and inequality because that impacts us as much as so many
Correct.
people want to say like, oh, racism isn't real. It is real. It is real, and it impacts us. It's an extra layer of burden on our shoulders as we
Mm-hmm.
walk through life, even whether it's seen or not seen. So it has some really great resources in there, even under the books they recommend. I've read a couple. So
Okay.
that's NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Okay, thank you. And definitely I'm gonna get the info from you because I'm gonna put this in the show notes as well so that people have it. Because I think
Yeah, I'll
oh
send you the link.
yeah, because I think that's the other thing. Like, I don't know how to do it. I'm like, y'all can Google and I'm gonna say hashtag y'all. But people can Google what you want, but it's kind of like there's so many resources because the therapy for black men.org, I didn't know they were giving away therapy. I'm saying giving away, but providing services for free. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's gonna cost too much. I'm like, they're out there, but the fact that there are tailoring it to black men, that really does say something. And hello, I'm gonna tap the mic again. Um, we are two black women. We're talking about this, and there's this thing where um the narrative is pushed that black women only talk about ourselves. I'm like, let's be very clear. When the plane is going down, you have to put the mask on yourself first. While we have the mask on ourselves now, we can reach over and help you. And I don't know too many
Mhm.
black women who talk about the beauty of therapy who don't give out resources for black men. It's just a little bit more acceptable for
Yeah,
us because we're women. It's like, no, believe me, we're like,
yeah.
girl, we're trying to get you to go to therapy with us too. Not just get your barber, who is a very, very wise man. Probably his name is Calvin. Usually they are, and they're very smart, but they got their own shit going on.
Mhm.
And they probably like, again, don't just think, just don't get it
Well,
like,
and that's
hey,
how you have a lot of like, and I know people hate to hear the word toxic.
mm-hmm, the word toxic, yeah.
I was gonna say it's probably how you also have a lot of like toxic, like like those thoughts recirculating all the
Mm-hmm,
time because people are talking to people who think the same way, and
mm-hmm.
it's putting that stuff out there because like you said, the barber wasn't getting therapy help. They just are hearing something from whoever they heard it, and now they're passing it on to whomever. And like at some point, someone's gonna have to break the cycle in there with some new thinking.
Somewhere.
Because just because something was always done a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. Sometimes there's something different, and we
Yeah.
definitely want our men to heal because they impact our lives too.
Yeah.
Like if I can go through all the therapy I want, but if everyone else around me isn't getting any and they're still bringing all their stuff to the table, like
That's a
it
lot you have to take
makes
in
my
along with
life
your own
harder
stuff
too.
too.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, because I think that's what it is when people are like, why
exactly.
therapists have their own therapists? I'm like, yeah, because they're asking a lot of questions. They're taking in a lot of information. They are taking in some trauma because they got to listen to it. So it's like, believe me, they need an outlet as well. It's like, if you're taking everything on, it's like, when are you going to like release some of it? So you may have to talk to your own therapist. I'm like, that's why therapists have therapists. It's like, that's like, why does a dentist have a dentist? What? Because he can't like, I mean, he could clean his own teeth if you talk to his hygienist, but it's like, yeah, I might need these things. It's like, but it's like we want you to heal because also stop thinking if you get a girl, that means you ain't got to get no healing. And I'm like, I just need a woman. I'm like, no, you don't. You need a therapist. It's like, yeah, it's like people got their own stuff going on, but also, why wouldn't you want to be better for your mate, for yourself, and for your mate, and for your
Yeah.
children? Because there's a lot of like harm that could be like travel. trauma, displacement you're putting onto somebody else, where it's like, oh baby, please heal. Because there are a lot of adults who are going through therapy because they had to deal with a lot of shit when they were children, because they never got the help, or they were told
Mm-hmm.
like black people don't do that, black men don't do that, black boys don't do that, black men don't cry. Please cry. Please do. Please give all of your
Right.
feelings. I mean, rage is a feeling, anger is a feeling, but so is sadness and
Yeah,
being
and
hurt.
that's a
Those are
huge thing to remember
feelings.
as well. You know, you said
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say that's a huge thing to remember as well. You said it earlier that, it's not, it doesn't look a certain way, and it doesn't. Sometimes you look happy, sometimes you look, for me, I can tell when I'm getting into one of my episodes because everything starts irritating me. And I'm not really an angry person.
Mm.
When I'm getting annoyed
But you
quickly,
get
like
annoyed,
I
like,
know that those are usually the first signs of my depression. That I start getting irritated. Before the sadness, before the tears, I'm annoyed with everyone, you know. Yeah, and so people don't often realize that, like, something that person that's raging out all the time, the men with their anger, sometimes that's an outlet for their depression. They just feel
mm-hmm.
more comfortable expressing anger than sadness. And they think because I'm not crying, I'm not depressed. Okay, but are you raging and are you mad at everyone and everything? And are you always a minute away from snapping? That could be your depression.
Yeah. So it's not random, but it feels random. So there's a show on called Family or Fiance. So it was off for a few weeks because they were showing
Hmm.
hair tales, and that Oprah produced a documentary docu series. So of course that's why they did it. But they had a couple on there where they were trying to save their marriages, like they were already married, trying to save it. And so the man was on, like the husband, he had physical manifestation of pain, like he was like achy, he was like nauseous, he looked green. And then you come to find out that he lost his mother, and then a few weeks after that he lost they lost a child. So he's grieving his mom,
Oh,
he's grieving his child, and then his child that
mhm.
doesn't live in the state, he wasn't seeing her all that often. We're also in the pandemic, so it's kind of like it's all that stuff. And it's like the first day he looked lethargic and just sick, and the next day he was just, and the therapist is trying to help because it's kind of like that whole toxic masculinity. Believe me, everybody who subscribes to it does not identify as male. Everybody, toxic masculinity, there are women who like, it's parts of toxic masculinity we all kind of subscribe to, because she was doing like, sit up and pay attention, and it
Oh,
was just like,
absolutely.
I'm like, wait a minute, this man looks really sick. I'm like, I was like, wait, what's physically wrong with him? And then it's like he was crying. He's like, I'm so sorry. And then she's like, there's nothing wrong with you crying. But that's the thing, that is beat into all of us. A man crying is like, wait,
Mm.
why? And I'm like, wait, why not? It's like sometimes, like, I cry when I'm angry, I cry when I'm sad, I cry when I'm happy. So it's kind of like tears are not, they're not weakness, but it's like it's so ingrained in us that it is. But to see this
Uh,
man just like, that's a lot. Even me saying, I'm like, that is a lot that he has to deal with. It's like,
mhm.
that's a lot. It's like there's no way you can't, you're not gonna be okay for a little while, and you have to be okay with that. It's like you just have to understand, like, you can see why he's not okay. But it's like, that's the thing, that's like
Yeah.
the thing that we put, and I'm saying the hashtag we, not me and Nyemade, but the hashtag we put on men, most notably black men, is that you can't do this. I'm like, we're not the only oppressed group whose men have this thing of, you got to be ultra masculine, you can't really show emotions, you got to be a provider, and that's it. Because like, we're not the only black and brown, we're not the only community that have this issue. There's a lot of
Right.
machismo that's like spread across oppressed groups, because we can put that under like, oh, it's because of white supremacy. You're like, oh yeah, because we can't look weak, quote unquote, in front of white people, when white people kind of
Yeah.
literally beat the strength out of our people during slavery. Ooh,
Yep.
sorry.
Yep.
I'm like, I'm shaking the table. It's like, I am. But
No,
it
but
is.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's so true, and we still are constantly fighting against that. And I think a lot of things that we take as like these badges of honor are really things that were terrible things that were done to us that we just continue on like it's okay and it's not
Yeah.
okay.
at
I'm not going to get on my
all.
spanking soapbox, but it's just
Oh my God. Were
like
you talking about a
beating
minds
people,
through
like we
mine
are like,
too?
oh, that's discipline.
Because I
And,
was,
we carry it on like it is. And
it's not. I'm sorry. As soon as you said discipline, I was thinking
no,
about
I
a
was just
Mars
going to
through the
say,
mire.
like we carry it on like it's okay. And it's not.
It is not.
Right.
That whole thing with that basketball
And,
player who punched his daughter in the face. People are like, well, I'm like, time out. What you mean, well? It's like this man literally punched his
right.
daughter in the face. And it's like, okay, so what did she do? Apparently, allegedly, it is she answered what to his mother. And I'm like, girl, what the hell is happening? And like, and he has two daughters, and they don't know if it was the 14-year-old or the 17-year-old. I'm like, yeah, that's still two different ages, but that shouldn't have happened. Because it's like, what are you actually sending to those women? If I say something some man don't like, he can put his hands on me. That is what you're sending there. Because I still remember
Right.
when Adrian Peterson put bruises on his two or 3-year-old child. People are like, well, discipline. That man is a machine. He is Adrian Peterson. That is a football player. He's a child. No, that is abuse.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, that's not okay to put bruises
Yeah.
on your children. You are not you're not bump your fist as a basketball player and allegedly punching your daughter in the face. It's like, yeah, what what kind of anger problems do you have right now? This is far against you could literally I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, because it's like, I don't know if you're the same way. My mother would tell me about her grandmother. She's like, my grandmother didn't put her hands on me. She just shot me with a look. It's like, yeah, see how that
Mm-hmm.
worked? It's like you can actually use your words or just a look. You're like, I don't
Right.
know. Anybody else grandmother had to like the
Right.
stare of, oh Lord, I don't want no problems. I don't want no problems.
Well, and I mean, people really just act like because it's something that's been done for so long
Yeah,
that it's normal and it's okay. And first of all cultures don't necessarily beat their
right.
children. And it's interesting that we can identify if an adult hits another adult to teach them a lesson, it's abuse. If you hit a senior to teach them a lesson, it's elder abuse.
Mm-hmm.
If you hit a dog to teach them a lesson, it's animal abuse, but you can do it to a child and say it's discipline.
Yeah.
What?
It
Like,
was like,
and people go, well, they wouldn't learn otherwise. Well, if they don't have the mental capacity because they're so young, if you don't think that you can rationalize with them because they're that young via conversation, then why would hitting with them, like, what is hitting them going to do? What is hitting them really going to teach them? You think that at that age they can rationalize that you're hitting them with love and it's not abuse? No,
yeah.
it's all abuse to them. So then, when we talk about mental illness and mental health, and all of that, like that it also is something that they carry with them and they grow
Mm-hmm.
up. And there's so many people who love to say things like, well, I dealt with it and I'm fine. It's like, well, if it
Are you
wasn't fine for
fine?
you, then why do you wish it on other people? Like, are you right? Like, are you actually fine? Or are you, still taking out your angers another way? Are you incapable of like having a disciplined conversation with the child without hitting them? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not okay. And just because it's been done for so long doesn't make it okay, and not to take everything back to slavery, but, just because it was something that was done to us as a way of disciplining us,
Mm-hmm.
then doesn't mean that we should continue that on with our children. And it does impact your mental health,
Of course.
especially depending on the level with which the child has to deal with it. And then it also then trickles to relationships, like you said with that daughter. Like, what is it teaching her? If you grow up with your parents putting their hands on you and telling you that's love, then
Mm-hmm.
what's going to stop you from getting in a relationship with someone else who puts their hands on you and
Yeah.
tells you that's love? So we really have to think about those things. And it's not anyone's fault
Mm-hmm.
how they grew up, but it is at some point you do have to take responsibility for how you deal with what you were raised with and what you were around and what you choose to continue.
Correct.
One of the things I love about my mother is that she's been through a lot, but she
Mm-hmm.
made sure that a lot of it stopped with her and she changed things with the way she raised us. And
Yeah.
everybody has that choice, that ability. Some people can do it on their own. Some people need to get therapists, need to get help, but like just
Mm-hmm.
because you went through something doesn't mean that you have to continue that on to further generations. You can be someone who helps make those changes, and sometimes it's identifying within yourself. And I think part of it is that people don't like to think of themselves as victims. They really don't, and so they'd rather put a situation on somebody else and say, see, they're not a victim because they know that they themselves went through that and they don't want
Mm-hmm.
to be seen as a victim. But
Yeah.
sorry, maybe you were a victim in that situation and you need to address that so you can heal from that, so you can have compassion for others, and also so you don't pass down that trauma to other people around you.
Yeah. Yeah. It because it's so funny. It's not funny. But this is why I like to talk about things in nuance, because it's not black and white. It's like it's just not. It's like it's a lot more gray. Because even with the passing of Twitch, it's so much gray. It's like you could do it like, oh, it's black and white. It's not. It's not. It's a lot. And the thing about it is, it's also a lot that people don't know. Because if people are looking like, I'm looking at his social media, and it's like, yeah, he's only showing you what he wants you to see. There's a lot of people who have like a social media that looks one way, and then you see them out in the wild, and it's two
Mhm.
totally different things. It's like social media is designed
Yep.
for you to paint a picture of your life. It is not candid. Like even reality TV is edited. Social media is edited.
Mm.
We're only seeing one little part of it. So you can look at it like, oh well, he was dancing. I'm like, there are a lot of people who dance when they sad. Like what? Like people are depressed. I'm like, oh, I could be sitting
Well,
in
and
my
social media is your
bed.
highlight reel.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's not that like there's not a this is not a ring camera where you're looking at my whole life,
Mm.
and also I know we're talking about this because we're just talking about it because it's just like heavy, but please know there are a lot of people who probably have attempted and quote unquote failed. Failed and successful is just a weird way to put this in. But I believe there are people who also came out and talked about their attempts. It's like, yeah, I attempted. There are people who have come out and said it. There are people who have, I think it's a semicolon that they get the tattoo of when
Hmm.
they had a suicide attempt. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said the word.
Hmm.
Um,
Honestly, though, there's nothing wrong with saying the word, and that's
okay,
part of what helps remove the stigma. Is that it's
okay,
not a
mm-hmm.
big bad dirty word. It's like it's the word, and even when we talk about it, um, something to say. There's nothing wrong with saying the word suicide. It's saying like someone committed it. Is that's what we're trying to get rid
Okay,
of that
okay,
language because like commit sort of is like they're doing a crime. Like you commit fraud, you commit whatever.
mm-hmm.
So to say it where we're trying to encourage is to say died by suicide.
Okay,
But it's still it's the word, right? There's nothing. It is what it is, and it's not a dirty word, and that also stops people from wanting to talk about it. Like, oh, if I mention it, I'll be putting the thoughts in their heads. Like, you won't
mm,
be. They probably were already thinking that. If you
yeah,
are worried that somebody is having, suicidal thoughts or something, talk to them about it. Ask them about it. You're not putting the
mm-hmm.
thoughts into their head. Their thoughts are already there. It's just people don't. It makes people feel uncomfortable, which I get. But yeah, you can say it. It's just, we just say like to try to say died by suicide instead of like committed.
Okay, that is helpful. Thank you. So I have a question for you. Um, so when you find out someone had an attempt, is it wrong to say, I'm glad you're still here? Or is that insensitive?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I've only recently been open about my attempt because it's a hard one because the minute you're open about it, here come the stigmas.
Yeah.
But no, I mean I can speak to me personally. It doesn't make me upset or sad. I'm glad you're still here. What is upsetting is like, aren't like I that is okay to phrase it like that. Like, I'm glad you're still here. I'm happy you're here. But I hate when people are like, "Oh, aren't you glad that didn't happen?" Or aren't you? No, actually, you don't know
Mm,
if I'm not. Yeah, especially
mm,
as I was just telling you, I live with passive suicide ideations at all
mm-hmm.
times. So actually, no, I'm not necessarily so glad. I am, but I'm not. You know what I mean? And so when people say things like that, it's insensitive, and
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know if that person is glad that it didn't go through. Maybe that person's upset that
Yeah.
it didn't go through, depending on the time with which you're speaking to them. But I think there's nothing wrong with saying, like, I'm glad you're here, or I'm happy you're here, things like that.
Okay. Okay. Because it's like I was wondering, but then I also was like, I don't think it would be bad, but let me just ask the question. Because I think
Mhm.
it's like nowadays, it's nothing wrong with weighing your words because
Mhm.
everyone doesn't have to just know exactly how you mean something. It's like you also can have a good word choice. It's like it doesn't have to be
Mhm.
like, well, you shouldn't think like that. I'm like, well, you know what they meant. Actually, no, I don't. But the person that you know you are speaking, you're like, let me weigh this a little bit and just kind of realize if you have a word budget, budget your words. Go
Right.
do good with your word budget.
Yep.
Because
Just because you think it doesn't mean you have to say it. And we
great.
very much live in a society where people think if I think it, I have to say it. No, you don't. You
You
can keep
don't
your mouth shut. Or
you
like when people, it drives me nuts when people are like, I'm just speaking the truth. Are you though? Or are you
you're
speaking
speaking
your
your
truth?
opinion.
Your truth is not everyone's truth. And there's a lot of people who mistakenly think that because they think a certain way, then everybody must think that same way.
No.
Everybody, they're just afraid to say it. No, and this may come as a shock, but everybody does not think the way you think. And
Mm-mm.
there are very few things that are like actual facts. Most things are opinions. And
Right.
that's a hard pill for people to swallow, is that most
Mm-hmm.
things are opinions. And when there's an opinion, there isn't actually a right or wrong. It's just an opinion. So you can have your opinion and be right, and I can have my opinion and be right, and we can be polar opposite. Now, there are some things that are factual right and wrong. I'm not saying that there's none,
Mm-hmm.
but even
Right.
then, you'll find someone who's on the other side of it who thinks the complete opposite. So,
Yeah.
um, just that compassion, above all else, have that compassion. Above all else, like keep your mouth shut if you're not adding something positive to
Mm-hmm.
someone, just because people just like to say things and they don't always need to.
Yeah. Um, so speaking of saying things, um, Twitch's wife has made a statement. I think a couple of his brothers have made a statement, and also his mother. I don't know what I would say. I don't think I would mentally be prepared. I think this
Mhm.
shows tremendous strength and grace for all of the people in his lives to have something to say. But to be very honest, it's like I don't have the words right now. I'm like, yeah, because I don't, it's been too soon. I don't think he'll
Mhm.
ever have the words. And that quite is okay. But I think because he is famous, people are like, oh my God, what about his mama? I'm like, you do realize he probably had cousins,
Mhm.
in-laws who probably are finding out on social media and not exactly, is this not something you put in a family group chat?
All right, all
So
right.
it's kind of like it's like the way that we have microwave culture. Because literally, I was on my way to work. I think it was like 8 something in the morning, and it was all over social media. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like you go, yeah, even if it was a cousin that maybe he hadn't talked to since 4th of July, I don't think anybody needs to find out on social media how this is going. It's like, wait, how am
Yeah.
I finding out here? It also made me think about the guy who played Tommy from the Power Rangers. And it was like,
Mhm.
what? They're like, he was just here. I'm like, you have no idea what's going on with him.
All right.
None.
Well, it's hard too because it's like a catch 22 or a double-edged sword because
Mm-hmm.
on one hand, so I've been a fan of Twitches since he first popped up on So You Think You Could Dance. That was back in 2008,
Oh,
and
oh,
so when
okay,
he
okay.
passed and I heard about it, I was so heartbroken because yes, I don't know him. I've never
Mm-hmm.
spoken a word to that man in my life. I'm like, but I remember him winning the show. I remember when he started dating Allison. I remember
Mm-hmm.
one of like his famous dances. I remember when he did Ellen. I saw pictures of his wedding. Like he's been my friend in my mind for
Wow.
14 years. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like on one level, like we don't know them, but there really are people, whether it's reality people or celebs, but I feel like even more so with our reality people because we see so much of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you are losing this friend. But that being said, I think sometimes people lose fact lose sight of the fact that like, you really don't know them and you really aren't owed anything from them. Like it kills me that Allison had to make a statement days after her husband's passed because everybody wants to know what she thinks. Like she should be able to grieve in peace. And it's not even the situation. There are so many times where people are like, I want to know this, blah, blah. Like it's not your business. It's not like we don't own them. We don't have rights to them. Like just because they shared this one part of their lives with us, like you said, doesn't mean they're sharing everything with us because social media
Mm-hmm.
is catered or curated.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is people's highlight reels. So
Yep.
you don't know everything about them. And at the end of the day, we're really not owed. Like as much as I'm like, oh, he's been in my life for 14 years, I still don't know him. And his wife and his mother does not owe us a statement. Like the fact that she even
Correct.
had to come out and say, I'm not ready to say anything at this point. I just want to be like, who's hounding you two so I can beat them?
Correct.
Because like
Come
nobody
on,
should be
beat
bothering
them.
you right now.
Who are
Like
they?
you
I
just
will
lost your
fight
son.
them.
Why is anybody bothering you? I will fight them.
I,
Um,
I love this. It's like that's right. Get you somebody who's go like who's bothering you because I will fight them. It's like oh okay. It's like
right?
okay because you're right. It's like seriously who's sorry nobody's asking for her to make a statement or better yet you shouldn't because this
No
also
one
makes me think about
no one
Regina.
should be asking her, but they are, and that's annoying.
Yeah, it is. Because this also makes me think about Regina King, who also
Yep.
lost her son. And
Yes.
I was like, please leave her alone. Please do
Hmm.
not ask her to figure this out or try to go, like, what do you think? Please leave it alone. And I think for the most part, and it probably is on her part more than anything else, you don't really see her. She's not having like any interviews. It's like, yeah, please leave her alone.
Hmm.
Like,
Well, and I think that they, on some level, give a little bit more respect because we still, even though I'm all about like the equality of like reality people are celebs, just like actors and stuff, we
mm-hmm,
still do give like different levels of respect to different things.
true.
But I do also think that because of the entrance level into their lives that reality stars give us, we
Mm-hmm.
feel more connected to them as well. You know what I mean? Like with Regina King, like we saw her and we know like her son and her had a great relationships. But I think
Yeah.
people are respectful of the fact that we don't know a ton about their lives. Versus, like
Yeah.
I said, like I can tell you how Twitch did his proposal. I can tell you stuff from their wedding. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell you about him adopting the daughter and about their two kids. And I can describe to you what their living room looks. You know what I mean? Like so
Mm-hmm.
we feel like we're so invested in their
Right. Yeah,
lives that
yeah.
it makes it even harder for some people to acknowledge that they are not actually invested in their lives. And those people need to have that moment and that time for themselves. I think people tend to be even more demanding, unfortunately, of reality stars because they're like, oh, they're just like us. And then they want to be nosy. But I mean, we do it in real life too. I mean,
Right.
I know I do, and I try not to, but when you hear about someone passing away, you want to know how, you want to know why, like, especially when they're younger, like what happened.
Yeah.
But I think it's okay to not expect answers to that. Like I officially am not looking at any comment sections with anything regarding
Yeah.
him because it just sets me off, the things
Mm-hmm.
that people are saying. It just so for my mental health and for my peace of mind, I can't look at those things. So I hope his family isn't looking at those things because people don't also think about that his family looks at those things, even if not looking
Yeah.
today. Like some people are making wild accusations. Like, what if like 10 years from now his son is like, oh, I want to see what people are saying about my dad. And now there's
Mm-hmm.
those wild things in the comment section. People just don't think before they put stuff out there.
Correct. They don't. It's kind of like, oh, I mean, what? I mean, this is what happened. I'm like, yeah, no, this is not okay. It's like, it's just not. And it's kind of like, I don't, if it is shocking for people who don't know Twitch, imagine being in this family.
Right.
Imagine being his family or his friends that was like,
Hmm.
yeah, I know him. Y'all don't. It's
Right.
this is gonna bother me and it's gonna hurt for a little while, if not forever.
Hmm.
It's like give people some room. It really, 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 please do. Um, Nyemade, thank you for being here. Thank you for having this conversation with me. Thank you for being so open. Because it takes a very special person to be like, no, no, let's talk about this. Because some people are like, nope, nope, I don't want to talk about it. Like, nope, it might do like, and let me just say that it is okay if you say no, I don't want to talk about this because it's
Yeah.
heavy. Because I don't think anybody doesn't either have heard about someone dying by suicide or know somebody
Right.
who has at
Yep.
least attempted.
Hmm.
I've had all three.
Yeah.
I've had
Yeah.
all three. It's like
It's a
it's a
hard
hard.
subject to talk about
Yeah.
because of stigma because of personal things, you know. That's why I say, like, at the end of the day, have compassion for people who have done it, who have attempted it. Even sometimes the people who, you know, make comments on the side of like, oh, someone is, you know, selfish, or why would someone make like a permanent decision like that? You never know. Maybe that person is someone who has lost someone to it. And so they're just thinking on the viewpoint of like, you know, this person that I loved in my life is now gone, over something that I could have helped them with, or, you know,
Mhm.
you never know what people are dealing with. And so it, it never hurts to be compassionate. You're not going to
Yeah.
regret having some level of compassion for people. And you also don't know what other people around you are dealing with when you make comments in certain ways, you know. So I think that it's important to keep that in mind, and to know that there's help out there if
Hmm.
people need help. Um, if you feel comfortable talking about it, or you want to talk about it, most people want to hear and listen, because there's also a lot of people who don't feel comfortable. I know, you know, I was telling you I recently did my IG live about it to sort of
Hmm.
explain
Hmm.
what it's like living with it, because I know that as uncomfortable as it is for me to talk about it, I know there's a lot of people who can't and who don't understand. And I feel like it's kind of my responsibility, if I can, to do that.
Yeah.
But no matter what side of it you're on, you know, just find someone who makes you feel comfortable talking if you need to talk, or who can listen if you need somebody to listen. And if
Mhm.
people come to you, make sure to ask them, are you looking for, you know, support, or are you trying to help get a resolution? And I do that with anything. It's not even
Mm.
necessarily this topic. Like, if you come
Uh-huh.
to me, I will
Yeah.
ask you, like, are you venting, or am I helping
Hmm.
you come up with a solution? Because I don't want to throw out solutions to you when that's not what you need. You just
Yeah.
need someone to be like, I can't believe it, because I love venting. I'm a very
Hmm.
rational, I'm a very rational thinking person. I'm a very like solutions driven person. Like, I usually know the right answer, but sometimes I just want to bitch and moan for a moment. I just don't want to be like,
Right.
I can't believe it, girl. What?
Like,
You know,
girl,
and
girl, I saw it
yes,
too. It's like,
yes.
okay.
Like, I don't need you to tell me to see it this way. Like, I will in a minute. Let me just get
I
this
will
out.
in a minute.
So, you know,
I
I think
will
it's
in a
important
minute.
to ask people that, like, what do they need from you when they are coming to you with that, so that you can not assume that you know what they need from you. And then, like I
Hmm.
said, it just comes back to having that compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree. Because it's like sometimes it's like you want to vent and be like, well, I'm gonna do all this. I'm like, no, girl, I was just venting. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
unless I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting with a question of, hey, I need help doing XYZ. But if I'm just,
Right.
but I'm glad you start with, okay, am I venting? So I should go get my wine, or should I go get my notebook?
Right. Right.
Which you want me to grab? Which one?
Yes. Yes.
But Nyemade, before we get out of here, please tell everybody how they can find you. And again, y'all, I will be posting all the links that Nyemade is going to send me for NAMI. I'm going to also post a link for therapyforblackmen.org as well.
Yes. And again, my name is Mari Bewu, and you can find me. I'm on social media as that African butterfly. Because when I signed up, Go was taken, so I became that African butterfly.
Oh, okay.
Um, and you can find me. I am always, my DMs are open if you need anyone to talk to. But as I also mentioned, I am the Diversity and Equity Fellow with NAMI Delaware. So if you ever need someone to talk to your organization, your school, your girls after school group, your, you know, especially with this digital age, you know, I do Zooms for organizations as well on the topic of mental health. I've done it for suicide awareness. I've did one for the bank on workplace biases. So if you need organizations, especially race related and things like that, diversity and inclusion, you can reach out to me, and I'm happy to either do one of our current presentations or work with you to do a customized presentation. But anything we can do to get the word out about mental health and mental illness and make people more aware, you know, we're happy to help. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Again, it's that African butterfly on social media, email that African butterfly at Gmail. And I'm happy to connect with you.
Well, thank you so much, Nyemade. Um, and everybody, this has been, I will say this, I can say this, this is great. This has been the last Mocha Minutes episode for 2022. This
Woo.
upcoming weekend is Christmas and then New Year's. I am off from work, which means I'm off from everything, and it's okay to shut down for the last week in December.
Mhm.
So, the Mocha Minutes podcast will be back in 2023. Thank you so much for everybody for almost like hanging in there with me, but yeah, hanging in with me. 2022 has been a year. It's been one of the hardest years of my life. So I appreciate
Mhm.
everyone who has DM'd me. Nyemade is one of those people that she learns like, hey, how are you? I was just thinking about you. Um, so to everybody who sent very nice, sweet notes, funny videos, calls, texts, chirps. I'm just naming everything I can think of for anybody who's reached out to me. I appreciate all of you. And I appreciate everyone who's listened, who has downloaded, who's told everybody about the show that spent a good chunk of this year not happening. Because again, healing. I am not healed, I am healing. But
Mhm.
the Mocha Minutes podcast will be back in 2023. Everybody, please enjoy your holidays. Hanukkah has started, so please, happy Hanukkah if you celebrate. If you're celebrating Kwanzaa, definitely celebrating Kwanzaa. Enjoy. I love Kwanzaa celebrations; they're just beautiful. And of course, if you're celebrating Christmas, happy Merry Christmas. If you're like, I don't celebrate any of these things, and I just celebrate winter solstice, happy winter solstice. See, we are covering
Yes.
everything. Or if you're like, I'm just celebrating Wednesday, happy Wednesday. See how that works?
Everyone. Yes.
But everybody, please have a great time and please take care of yourself and others. And also be kind to yourself and be kind to others because, we're talking about loss. This around this time is a very heavy time when you're dealing with loss because then all the
Mhm.
memories of the people who are not here come flooding back to you.
Yeah.
So take care of yourself and take care of others. This has been the Mocha Minutes podcast. I will be back in 2023. Bye.
Bye.